program's always a fun one. Obviously, I do like to say on this, for the disclosure piece, every situation is gonna be different. So, if you have questions individually, let me know. This isn't specific advice to anyone, but kind of overarching from, an SSI, SSDI standpoint. So, I got you guys up on what special care is, our mission and everything like that. So we can see if I think the next one is, we can see if this one. Perfect, so, has everyone heard of SSI? Or Supplemental Security Income? Okay. It's that massive $943 a month that the government thinks that we should be able to live off of. Okay? Yeah, the government's gonna do what the government's gonna do. But today we're gonna go over a few different pieces. We're gonna go over the SSI, the SSDI side, which if you haven't heard of that, it's a great benefit for us as well. And then Medicaid and Medicaid waivers. Jim's got some great resources on the waivers, so I'll defer to him on that. And then state-specific programs as well, which again, we're Texas, we're 48 out of 50, so we don't really have many. So, but perfect. So, the best way to think about SSI, SSDI, and Medicaid and Medicare is that SSI and SSDI is the money side. Medicaid, Medicare is your medical side. Okay? SSI is the benefit that our child can receive once they turn 18. Okay? Because typically, and they're not receiving it before 18 because our family as a whole is not receiving it. Okay? If you are receiving it, it's because you qualify as a household, and some families qualify as a household because of income to get SSI as a benefit. Okay? At age 18, again, they are their own individual, they're their own person. So, if we're not making an income, SSI can come in and help support our child. Okay? Like I said, this year, it's $943 a month. The government thinks that's what it takes to live off of. And it's even funnier because they think that it's broken into thirds essentially. 1/3 of that is meant to go to rent, 1/3 is meant to go to food, and 1/3 is meant to go to miscellaneous. Meaning that they think that rent should be about $315 a month. I don't know where they're finding rent is gonna be $315 a month, but that's how it should be allocated. Okay? So the reason I bring up rent is they also cut it down by what is needed and what is not needed. Just like Jim brought up with the passports, the IDs, and all of that, people aren't educated at the Social Security office on all of these different nuances. Okay? They're not educated on, okay, hey, if a family with special needs comes in, here's how we should position, how we should answer the questions. They sit down at their office that day and they look through and they have their list of questions. Okay? Nothing against them, that is their job, is to ask the questions. So when you go to the Social Security office to try to apply for SSI, one of the early questions that they ask you is, does your child pay rent? Or where does your child live? You say with you, and does your child pay rent? Well, most parents, if we're thinking as a parent, no, my kid doesn't pay me rent. I've got a child with special needs, they're not paying rent. If you say no, you just lost 1/3 of your SSI check. Because the government is paying that $315 for rent. Okay? So, we have to kind of think of it in a different way, and that's with all of these government benefits, we have to think of it in a different way. Just like if we think of ourselves as a guardian, now we're thinking of ourselves, we're a parent and a caregiver, but we also need to be landlord. Okay? So, child turns 18, you go to the Social Security office to get SSI. Yes, they are paying rent. I would suggest having the lease document or the rental agreement with you to prove that, hey, here's what they are going to be paying. Okay, and we have some copies of those if you guys want to see kind of what that looks like, but it's a simple document that just says, hey, my child is paying me $350 or $400 a month to live in my house, to cover utilities, and to have access to common areas. Okay, that's going to get us the full check that our child should be receiving. Okay, the reason this is important is because some families that think, well, I was fine. I was fine before SSI. I don't have to have it, this and that. this is a great benefit that our children should have. That's going to help maximize their benefits and their lifestyle going forward. Okay?
It's an entitlement under our law.
Yes. And so they should be getting the full SSI check. Doesn't matter that that person sitting behind the desk doesn't know the full situation. We should be getting the full SSI. Okay? So, a couple more things with SSI. It's a system that's obviously meant to be worked out of. So they have benefits, like if your child is working, then essentially it reduces the SSI by 50 cents on the dollar. Okay, now there's a little bit more to the calculation, but think of it as, hey, if my child is, going to work somewhere and they're making $500 a month, well, when we get our SSI, we're gonna report that we made that $500, and our SSI is gonna go down by 250. Okay, so we're still making more income, we're earning our way off, but we're not losing it. Okay, the important part of that is that we want to make sure that we have $1 of SSI coming in. The reason we want that is so that we can maintain Medicaid, because as long as we're getting $1 of SSI, we're able to maintain our Medicaid benefit, which a lot of times is more beneficial to us than the $943 a month. Okay. I mentioned earlier the $2,000 asset limit. That will also disqualify. So we can be disqualified on the income side. We can also be disqualified on the asset side. So $2,000, which hasn't been raised, I think, since like 1972, which $2,000 back then was, a decent chunk compared to now. But that $2,000 asset limit, that is assets across the board. Not just, hey, I have $1,999 in this account, I'm okay. That also means if your child is working somewhere and they started the 401k, if they get over $2,000 in the bank account and the 401k and all that, that's going to disqualify them from SSI and Medicaid. Okay.
And if they're paying you a check and they find out, then you will owe them back money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting that $943 and they send you another $943 and you've already put $2,001 in a 401k, then you're going to have to send all of the money back. They're very good about calculating what is to be returned to them. And I've even had a family that they actually double paid them, and it hit them over the 2,000 limit, and they got penalized for that. So you do need to make sure that the second that money hits, it's being moved someplace else for rent, for whatever that is, utilities. When the 943 hits, $500 is going out so that nothing else is coming in. And I don't know if they still ask the same question, but they will say, like, if your child does not pay rent, will you evict them? The answer to get SSI is yes. So you need to know that, whatever your feelings about it, but if you want to get the full access, you're going to need to say, yes, I would do that.
Yep. And so from a kind of a planning perspective, when you guys think back on longer term planning as well, we have a lot of families that they charge the rent, and that's not necessarily to say, okay, that's put into our checkbook and we go spend it on whatever we want. That's the money that now they can use towards that future planning. Okay, so if they're getting $500 a month in rent, okay, well, hey, now that's $500 we can put in an account for our child, and we can save up in our name as the parent for our child and pass it on later through a trust or something like that. But it's your money. You can do with it as you please. Okay, because you are the landlord. You're collecting that paycheck now. Okay. The other thing to consider when we start talking about, okay, hey, we do have that $2,000 asset limit, is, okay, well, what if we do start getting close to that? Okay. One account that we can use is, have you guys heard of the ABLE account? Achieving a Better Living Experience. It was created in 2014. Essentially, it is the only account that our child can have in their name that does not disqualify them from the government benefits. Okay, so once we move the money into that account, like into the ABLE account from our checking, it doesn't go against our $2,000 asset limit. Okay? Just like everything else with the government, they give you something good, they're going to take something back. Okay? Money that is left, so money in the ABLE account has what's called the Medicaid clawback provision. Okay? So if we start putting some money in there, let's say we've built up $50,000 over the years in this ABLE account. Well, it's not affecting our SSI, it's not affecting our Medicaid, but if our child passes away, Medicaid has first right to go in there and take back what they spent on our child. So if they've spent $40,000 on them over their lifetime, they can go in, take 40 of that $50,000 to reimburse themselves. Okay? Again, it's not the end of the world because they did give the money and they're just reimbursing themselves, but that's where we use things like the special needs trust to where, hey, if we are accumulating more money, maybe we put money in the trust to protect it from like those clawbacks. And so just some different strategies to kind of think about there. Okay? Yeah, and we can, I'm sure there's more questions on SSI. We can go through those at the end too. So you guys write those down. I know that's, SSI is always the big one for questions, but we'll kind of move on to SSDI. So SSDI is Social Security Disability Income. Okay? This is when you step into retirement or you as the parent pass away, your child can actually claim benefits tied to your work record. Okay? So it's through the Disabled Adult Child Benefit or DAC benefit, which typically is going to be a raise for them. Okay, so like we turn 65, we step into retirement, we turn on our Social Security as mom or dad. Now instead of that $943, they're gonna get an increase to 50% of whatever our benefit is. Okay? Now it's not gonna be less than $943 because if like, you know, if our work record is and puts their 50% under that $943, SSI comes in and fills in the difference. Okay, so it's not gonna go down, it can only go up. But that changes some things as well, because we go from Medicaid to Medicare, okay, which typically is a better benefit for us too. So it's kind of another little raise. But that's really one of the big step ups that a lot of families don't know about or consider. And especially when we consider kind of our long-term planning and our retirement plans. You know, most of us when we step into retirement, we're not just planning for two, meaning mom and dad, we're planning that, okay, mom, dad, and our child, we have to get through retirement. Okay, so that's a big benefit that it gets 50% of what our Social Security check is gonna be. And then when we pass away, it bumps up to 75% of what our Social Security was. Okay? Cool, yep, and then so Medicaid and Medicare, it drives me insane. Again, the government, they made SSI and then SSDI, so everybody always gets those confused. And then you have Medicaid and Medicare at the same time.
Very different.
Yeah, and they're totally different. So with SSI, you get Medicaid. That's that entitlement benefit that our child gets at 18. Medicare is what they get, just like us, when we step into retirement, we claim our Social Security. Okay, completely different benefits. A lot of times, different doctors as well. So, you know, at age 18, we have a lot of big changes in doctors, and then when we step into retirement, we have more changes in doctors. Okay, it's not fun, but like I said, Medicare is typically a step up from Medicaid. Actually, go to the next one. Start with Medicaid. Yeah. So Medicaid, like I said, it's tied to SSI. That's why we want to make sure that we are getting $1 of SSI. You know, as we're working, you know, if our child is working, building up, you know, either assets or income, just keep that in mind. And hey, if they are able to work off of SSI and they have medical through work, great. That's what we want to see. That's how the system is designed. But also consider, so my brother, for example, he's great at a job for about 2 to 3 months. He can stick with it, he can go to work, everything is good, but once he hits that 2 or 3 month mark, he's done. There's no getting him back into the office setting or wherever it is. Okay, so for my brother, it was okay. He started working himself up, started making some money. We were okay. Hey, this is how it should work. And then we hit that 3 month mark, and he was just, I'm not going back. Okay, I don't want to say it's impossible to get back on SSI and Medicaid, but typically you're going through the full process again. Okay, so make sure that, hey, as we're building up, as we're working ourselves off, it is something that, hey, we can consistently do this before we give up the benefits completely. Okay? Yeah.
So SSI is not there just because you're disabled. SSI is there if you're unable to work.
Right.
So there's nothing in the law that says, because you're disabled, you get SSI. It's because you're disabled and you cannot work, then you're eligible for SSI. So the fact that he's working, it puts in a gray area, is he able to work or not, you know, and so.
Yeah, that's a great point too.
Did you want me to go back to
Yeah,
the?
you can go back to Medicare now, yeah.
Okay.
So Medicare, again, it's the same Medicare that we're gonna be on when we step into retirement as well. Okay, so it works a little bit different. We're no longer like needs based or anything. It's, hey, we're getting SSDI based on our parents' record, and so we get Medicare with that. Okay, so yeah, so regardless of financial status, we'll get that once we step into retirement. Medicaid, again, you know, I think we hit on most of these up to this point, but Medicaid is for, you know, financial needs. Once we turn 18 is when we can qualify for it, if we're not qualifying for it on a family basis. The asset, you know, income limit and asset limit, those are two things to really pay attention to as we're applying and as we're figuring all of this out from a planning side. Keep in mind the ABLE account and a special needs trust. Both are great tools, and people always ask me, what should I get? The ABLE account or the special needs trust? The best answer to that is both of them. Okay, because they both have their specific uses. The ABLE account, think of that as more of your spending account.
Slush fund.
That's that's the slush fund. That's money in and out. There's I won't say no restrictions, but there's very few restrictions on what that money can be spent on, as long as it's benefiting the child. Okay, the account was created because they didn't want to fix the system. They didn't want to fix SSI, so they said, hey, instead of fixing this, we're going to give you a loophole, and the loophole is the ABLE account. Hey, now you can have a little bit more money. You can put some money in there, but we get it back if you don't spend it all, and you know we spend money, Medicaid money on you. The trust, there are a few more limitations on how to spend the money out of a trust, but we don't have the other limits the ABLE account has. For example, the funding. The ABLE account can only be funded, I think this year is like $18,000. Unless your child's working, then it's a little bit higher. It's complicated. But yeah, $18,000 annually. So something like a legacy, or if you're trying to leave, you know, if hey, I bought I want to put my 401k into the special needs trust, or into a legacy for my child, you can't leave that to the ABLE account. You would have to leave that to something like a trust, okay? But, like I said, the trust has some limitations on what it can and cannot pay for, because it can't step on the toes of government benefits. So, for example, it can't pay rent. But, the ABLE account, the special needs trust can fund the ABLE account. Okay, so if there's ever anything where we're stuck in, well, I can't pay this from the special needs trust, well, hey, just transfer it into or fund the ABLE account for that year. Use the ABLE account to pay those assets, or pay what is needed. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So all those legal loopholes. But I think
What's the max limit of an ABLE account?
So the ABLE account also does have upper limits.
Cap.
Yeah, kind of a cap on there. So at $100,000, so once you build, $18,000 a year and you build up to $100,000, the SSI check is suspended, but you stay on Medicaid. Okay, so essentially they're saying, hey, okay, if you have $100 grand sitting in an ABLE account, we don't need to send you any more cash for a little while. Okay, so they'll suspend the $943 a month, but you stay on Medicaid. Okay, now we haven't seen anybody reach the 100,000 mark in an able account, again, cause we're limited on the funding. And we tell people, hey, just, keep it low, cause keep in mind also, if you have 100 grand in there, well, now all of that is eligible for that Medicaid clawback. Okay? Oh, one more piece on the able account. A lot of people, like when their child was first born, started a 529 account. Okay? The able account was written off of the 529 code. Okay, so it's 529A in the tax code. So if you do have a 529 account set up for your child with special needs, and you're thinking, okay, well, hey, that's an account that has money in it, that has their name on it, now we can transfer that to the able account. And now, instead of it being just spent on, specific college funding or higher education or the limits of a 529, now we've opened that up to, hey, almost anything that benefits our child, we can spend that on. Okay, so there's one kind of benefit there